Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Janice Lo. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. Hong Kong's flag carrier records its biggest interim net profit in over a decade. New transport arrangements cheer arrivals at the Kai Tak cruise terminal. And South American leaders host talks in a bid to save the Amazon rainforest. Cathay Pacific Airways has posted its best interim result in over a decade, recovering from a loss to return to the black as passenger numbers surged after COVID. The airline plans to repay the government for its help during the pandemic and boost its fleet. Macy Mogg reports.
Cathay Pacific Airways rebounded from a loss of $5 billion in the first half of last year to a net profit of $4.3 billion for the first 6 months of 2023. It's the airline's biggest interim profit in 13 years. The Cathay Group, including HK Express, saw its passenger revenue balloon from $2 billion in the first half of last year to $28 billion over the same period this year. The number of passengers surged from 335,000 between January and June last year to 7.8 million. Hong Kong's flag carrier is confident that passenger capacity will return to pre-COVID levels by the end of next year.
Considering the extraordinarily challenging circumstances that Cathay faced during the pandemic, these results represent a significant improvement, and they reflect the growing strength of our business. We expect to continue to see a solid performance through the rest of the year, and we think that the current performance shows that we're well on the way on our rebuilding journey.
A one-off gain of $1.9 billion from selling Air China shares also contributed to the profit. But revenue from Cathay's cargo arm decreased by 10%, falling from $14 billion last year to $12 billion, reflecting a weaker global market for air cargo. Cathay will not pay an interim dividend, but it will buy back half of the preference shares worth $9.8 billion held by the government before the end of this year, and plans to purchase the remainder by the end of next July. The shares were part of a rescue package for Cathay in 2020. The airline also intends to buy 32 more aircraft, which are expected to be delivered in 2029. Macy Mogg, HKIBC.
Cathay Pacific pilots have threatened to take industrial action and have sought legal advice on their plan. The Aircrew Officers Association sets Cathay slashed pilots' pay by at least 25%, but other airlines increased salaries. It added that Cathay needs another 650 captains, but trained only about 100 since the beginning of this year. The airline maintains that it has enough manpower.
We certainly do have sufficient pilots and indeed cabin crew and operational staff at all levels to support our flight schedule. We did see an elevated turnover of pilots during the very difficult period of the pandemic, particularly in late 2021 and early 22. That turnover has now been back at normal levels for some time.
A group representing Asian migrant workers in Hong Kong is pressing for an increase in wages and the food allowance.
We demand for the wage increase because the living condition in Hong Kong is very high, and we believe that the current wage of the domestic workers is not enough to live decently in Hong Kong.
Many of migrant domestic workers, they are feeling stressed not only just because of the working condition, but because of the financial situation. Labor Department said that, every food that provided by employer you can eat. Even the employer, they also mention every food in our house you can eat. But when the domestic worker try to get the food, the employer reported the police.
The Asian Migrants Coordinating Body Group met the Labor Department and expressed a hope that the monthly salary of domestic workers could be raised by $1,286 to $6,016. They are currently paid $4,730. The group also wants the food allowance to be more than doubled to $3,065. A government decision on their demands is expected by the end of next month. There have been complaints from the first batch of Hong Kong scouts who returned home after an international jamboree in South Korea was cut short because of an approaching typhoon. About 200 scouts were greeted by their relieved parents at the airport. Several teenagers complained that the campsite in Buan was dirty and the arrangements at the event were chaotic. But they would be willing to take part in a jamboree again. Tens of thousands of scouts are being evacuated ahead of the typhoon, but those from Britain and the United States left earlier because of the extreme heat in South Korea. Passengers on cruise liners calling at Hong Kong will now find it easier to leave the Kai Tak terminal. And they do not have to pay a cent unless they take taxis. As the pandemic faded into history, the Royal Caribbean's Spectrum of the Seas finally returns to Hong Kong last Friday. But holidaymakers on the cruise liner were disappointed with the poor transport links at the Kai Tak cruise terminal. The government reacted by taking remedial measures to preserve the city's status as a tourist-friendly destination. Taxis are no longer the only option to head out of the terminal. A free shuttle bus, number 22R, would take visitors to Kai Tak Station. There are also 3 free shuttle coaches, which go to the Tsim Sha Tsui Ferry Pier, the Peak Tram Central Terminus, West Kowloon Cultural District, Yin Po Fong Street in Mong Kok, as well as Kowloon and Admiralty stations. This tourist, who has been to Hong Kong on cruises several times, was relieved. She recalled queuing for taxis to get to the city center, but said the shuttle services are more convenient. In a bid to lure taxis to the cruise terminal, drivers are given a $50 cash coupon for liquefied petroleum gas. This taxi driver, who obtained a cash coupon autographed by Tourism Secretary Kevin Yeung, admitted that he only drove all the way to the terminal out of curiosity. I haven't been here, so I came to take a look, he said. Yeung said the transport arrangements have been smooth so far, but they will be constantly reviewed and there may be some fine-tuning.
The ultimate purpose is to make sure that tourists, when they arrive at Hong Kong, they have a smooth trip to the final destination or to the destination that they would like to go after going on shore.
The government is currently shouldering the expenses for the arrangements, but the terminal operator may be asked to chip in later on. Officials in Beijing have raised the death toll from the recent floods to 33, with 18 people still missing. As waters receded, the capital and the surrounding areas are facing new threats. There are fears that crops and livestock in rural areas may succumb to disease caused by dead animals and pests. A shortage of drinking water has been reported as the region tries to recover from its worst floods in 6 decades. Overseas, for the first time in 14 years, South American leaders are discussing a common plan of action to protect the Amazon rainforest. Indigenous tribes are also represented as President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva tries to reverse his predecessor's destructive policies on the world's largest rainforest. Azam Khan reports.
It's been hailed as a landmark summit, as leaders of 7 countries sharing a part of the Amazon rainforest gathered in the Brazilian city of Belém. Guyana, Ecuador, Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, Colombia, Suriname, and the host Brazil are charting a common course to enhance protection of what is commonly referred to as the lungs of the earth. Representatives of indigenous tribes also attended the two-day summit. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva said he hopes the conclave will awaken the long-dormant group, the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization. Lula said the severe escalation of the climate crisis demands more pressing cooperation. Collaborative strategies for tackling deforestation, financing sustainable development, as well as law enforcement cooperation are high on the summit agenda. The meeting is a handbrake on years of destructive policies under Lula's predecessor, Jair Bolsonaro. Azam Khan, HKIBC.
There's been a call for the elimination of all nuclear weapons as Nagasaki remembered the horrors of the American bombing of the Japanese city 78 years ago. At a memorial ceremony, participants paid tribute to the tens of thousands of people killed when an atomic bomb flattened Nagasaki on August 9, 1945. The city was hit 3 days after the United States dropped the world's first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. Survivors who are still suffering from radiation illnesses joined officials in urging nuclear powers to get rid of the weapons of mass destruction. A boat carrying mainly African migrants has sunk in the Mediterranean, drowning 41 people. 4 survivors said a group of 45 left Tunisia last Thursday, but their vessel sank within hours. They were rescued by a freighter and later transferred to an Italian Coast Guard ship. The survivors arrived only today on the Italian island of Lampedusa, 130 kilometers from where they began their perilous journey. Consumer prices on the mainland have fallen for the first time in 28 months, increasing pressure on policymakers to launch more stimulus measures. The consumer price index for last month dropped 0.3% from a year ago. Cheaper food was a key factor in the decline as people limited spending. The drop triggered fears that China would slip into deflation, but officials say July's retreat is temporary. Beijing has set an inflation target of 3% this year. The producer price index also dropped, falling 4.4%, marking the 10th straight month of contraction. Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index ended the day up by 61 points. To the top 10 active stocks, Tencent gained $2.40, while Alibaba gained $1.05. AIA lost 80 cents, Meituan gained 80 cents, while Kuaishou also gained $2. To the foreign exchange against the Hong Kong dollar, the euro is at 8.57, the pound's at 9.95, and the Canadian dollar is at 5.81. Over in the UK market, the FTSE 100 is currently up by 58 points. Back in Hong Kong, a wild boar has been captured in the heart of the city's business district as it was scrounging for food. The 1-meter-long creature was spotted outside Exchange Square at around 5:45 a.m. Police equipped with shields prevented the animal from dashing towards the traffic. It took 4 hours for officers from the Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation Department to lure the boar to a corner with food. The animal was then shot with a tranquilizer gun and taken away. Onto the weather now. Cloudy with some showers and a few thunderstorms tomorrow, but the sun will pop out as well during the day. Temperatures will range between 28 and 32 degrees. That's our main news for Wednesday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Janice Lo. Good evening.